Last week, we witnessed a major new offensive by opposition groups in northwest Syria. On Wednesday, the 27th of November, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, along with several other opposition forces, started to move towards Aleppo. By late Friday night, they were in control of the majority of Aleppo city. They had also captured Sarakeb, which intersects Syria's most strategic motorways. As I stand here, we do not know if HTS will succeed in pushing further south towards the city of Hama, which sits approximately 100 kilometres south of Aleppo. What we do know is that these developments mark the biggest shake-up of the conflict lines in Syria since 2020. In response, Russian airstrikes have increased on Idlib province, HTS's heartland, and on Aleppo, and there have been reports of Iranian-aligned groups moving into Syria to back up the Assad regime. Events are moving quickly, and the trajectory is unclear. My primary concern in the immediate term is the impact on civilians, and of course, delivery of humanitarian assistance. This is particularly worrying, Madam Deputy Speaker, if we see more large-scale attacks by the regime or Russia against civilians. I call directly this evening on all actors involved, including Iran and Russia, to act in accordance with international humanitarian law and not to target civilians or civilian infrastructure, including health facilities. Humanitarian actors should be granted full humanitarian access on the ground. In response to recent developments, we have been rapidly engaging key partners and interlocutors to assess the situation and coordinate responses. I spoke earlier to my Turkish counterparts, where I reiterated my concern about the potential for new escalation and the impact on civilians. I will be travelling to the region this weekend, where I plan to engage a range of partners on the latest developments, and I'll be speaking to the UK-funded Syrian organisation, the White Helmets, on Wednesday, who operate in northwest Syria, to better understand how they and other non-governmental organisations are responding to the situation and supporting people on the ground. The UK issued two statements over the weekend, Madam Deputy Speaker, one with the US, Germany and France, calling for de-escalation and the protection of civilians to prevent further displacement and disruption of humanitarian access. This is the right focus as the situation develops. But the current fighting also underscores that the situation in Syria is not sustainable. 13 years into the conflict, no side has or can decisively win on the battlefield, including Assad. A frozen conflict is not the same as peace. Syrians continue to flee the country. Drugs and arms smuggling from Syria threaten the region, and Iran and Russia continue to exert influence, propping up the Syrian regime. The underlying reasons for this conflict remain unaddressed. Recent developments in northwest only underscore the urgent need for a Syrian-led political solution to the conflict in Syria, in line with UN Security Council Resolution 2254. We urge all parties to re-engage with this process and the efforts of the UN Special Envoy Pedersen. I recognise this escalation also raises other questions, Madam Deputy Speaker. Firstly, on consular assistance, I should make clear the long-standing advice from my department is against all travel to Syria due to the ongoing conflict and unpredictable security conditions. Consular support is not available within Syria. All British embassy services in Damascus are suspended. I reiterate our long-standing advice. Any British nationals in Syria should leave the country by any practical means. On the wider humanitarian situation, we are closely monitoring. In northwest Syria, 4.1 million people, 80% of whom are women and children, were already in need prior to this escalation. Currently, there is no humanitarian corridor established for those fleeing, increasing terribly the risks to their safety. Since 2011, the UK has spent over £4 billion, our largest ever response to a single humanitarian crisis. In October, we announced a further £3 million to provide life-saving emergency assistance and healthcare to the most vulnerable citizens fleeing from the Lebanon conflict into Syria. Many of those will be in northwest Syria.